What's going on, Tamers? It's your boy Varney, and today, y'all already see the title of the video. This is how Bandai shafted Barbamon. Now, I want to preface this with, this is the second time I'm recording this video. I already recorded this. It was a nice 25-minute video. And when I went to edit it, the audio was scuffed and completely unusable, which is unfortunate. So here I am again, back to talk about it. But I'd like to think that if I think about that as a trial run, that this will be better. And it works out because I realized there are a couple more things that I want to touch on that I probably didn't touch on the first time. So we're going to see how this one goes. Now, this video is basically going to be a talking head video. So if you're not a fan of talking head videos, if you're not a fan of looking at me for the next, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, you can just throw it on in the background. There's not really going to be too much visuals here outside of the occasional card that I will pop up on screen. I'm just using this as a platform to give my thoughts. Y'all are, if you listen to the pod, you know, I love talking Digimon. So I'm just using this as an opportunity to talk about more Digimon, but more importantly, to engage with you, the community, to get my thoughts out there and to converse with you guys in the comments and see what you think and what your thoughts are. Because at the end of the day, that's what I love. I love discussion. I love discussion-based content. So I'm hoping that this is something that you guys like. So in talking about Barbamon, I guess let me start with this. The lore behind Barbamon is that, according to DigiGuard, shout out, in Digimon World Redigitize Decode, I believe the game is called, Barbamon, after US Taiga defeated the Vitiums, he abducted Rina, and then Taiga had to enlist the help of some of the other 7 great demon lords like Leviamon and Lucamon, Chaos Mode, to help him take down Barbamon. And I mean, first of all, let's be real. I mean, you know, 7 great demon lords, they're all in it for their own personal gain. But just the sheer fact that, like, as a player, you have to go enlist the help of other 7 great demon lords to take down another demon lord. It's kind of like insane, right? And then they did, of course, Leviamon's thing is like, you give me data, I'll do whatever you want. Sort of saying, I don't know what Lucamon was thinking. I never played the game. I'll preface it with that. But it just feels like he should have more of a commanding presence than he does in the game. And it's a shame because we just got Barbamon X, and it's just so trash. It's just so bad. To explain why Barbamon is so bad, let's look at why Mirage is so good. It's the perfect comparison, right? Mirage is literally blue hand control Barbamon. And it sucks. It sucks because these decks were set up, well, I say these decks, but Barbamon was set up to be a really good concept of a deck, and unfortunately, it was just really let down by game design. So look at why Mirage is good. Let's take a look at what it does. Always adding a card to your hand, right? There is no option. It is your opponent adds a card to their hand. So Galmon on play, both players draw a card. Your Tamer, both players draw a card. You've got a Galgamon that bounces level 3s. You've got a Mock Galgamon that bounces level 4s. And then you've got Mirage that bounces level 5 or lower. So you can bounce an entire line. And then you do have a burst mode, which can bounce anything. So you can effectively wipe a board out, you know, air quote, just by digivolving. And there aren't a lot of bounce protection mechanics outside of this Digimon is unaffected by your opponent's Digimon effects, and this Digimon is unaffected by effects, opponent's effects. You know, sure, we have bounce protection, but one of the biggest problems that we have with a deck like Mirage running around is that we just don't have enough of that type of protection. And even when you do, Mirage is so efficient at what it does because its inheritables aren't when a card is added to your opponent's hand, gain a memory. And that's insane, right? That's so insane because Mirage itself reads when a card is added to your opponent's hand by an effect, you gain 1 for every 4 cards in your opponent's hand. So by turn 3, you can end up with 8 cards in your hand. Easy peasy, as long as you're digivolving 8 cards in your hand, right? 2 memory Mirage is always going to gain, but on the right stack, you can effectively gain back 4 memory. You know, like Mirage pays for itself, and it sucks that as the opposing player against Mirage, it sucks that it does it like that, because it's like, damn, like how do I compete against this, you know? And then the other problem is when Mirage, even if it doesn't bounce a Digimon, it's going to add a security to your hand. And it's just like, damn, man, like there's just no good way to play around this card. And this isn't a Mirage trashing session. I'm just talking about why Mirage is so good and what the frustrations are, and then I can use that to compare to Barbamon and how bad it is, right? So let's take a look. Devimon is, if you're, first of all of these cards are conditional until you get to Barbamon. 5 or fewer, 7 or more. If you're at 6 cards, you are screwed unless you digivolve into Barbamon or Barba X. But Devi is an on deletion, either draw 1 or trash a card in your opponent's hand. So draw 1 at 5 or lower, trash 1 if they're 7 or higher. And that's the trend that we'll keep. You have a Devimon, which is a pop a level 3 or trash 1. Barrismon, gain a memory or trash 1. Neo Devi, I think that's a delete level 5 or lower, or delete a level 4 or lower or trash 1. And then you get to Barbamon, that is an unconditional trash any 1 card in your opponent's hand. Now, here's what makes Barbamon so bad, right? We're gonna pull up Barbamon. Like I said, I'm gonna be throwing these cards up on screen, but I'm pulling it up here so I can take a look at it. Barbamon says, when your opponent's hand is trashed from, you can play a play cost 10 or lower purple card from your trash without paying the cost. Cool. But for each card in your opponent's hand, you reduce the play cost maximum by 1. So this is gonna play out a play cost 10, but let's say you're able to get them down to 5 cards in hand. You can only play out a play cost 5 or lower for trashing a card in your opponent's hand. Let's take a look at Mirage. What does Mirage do? It gains 1 for every 4 in your opponent's hand. You see already where like the card economy just isn't there in comparing the 2 cards. Let's take a look at it in a different way. Mirages gain 1 for every 4. So like I said, by turn 3, 8 cards in hand, you're generally going to gain 2. It is not uncommon to have 12 cards in your hand against Mirage, and for Mirage to be able to gain 3 memory like it's nobody's business, plus more because they have other memory gaining inheritables. For Barbamon to even scratch that surface, you have to hope that your opponent just isn't drawing, that their searchers are whiffing, so they're not adding cards to their hand, their cards aren't replacing, and all of that. Because best case scenario, realistically speaking, best case scenario is that you can get your opponent down to 4, not even 4, I'd say 5 cards in hand, and Barbamon is only going to play out a play cost 5 or lower. If this effect had read, play out a play cost, see, here's another problem. Play cost 10 or lower purple card. That can get out of hand real quick. Sure, you don't want to just play out another Barbamon, but let's also be realistic about it. If it's going to count for every card in your opponent's hand, it's probably fine to be able to play out a card like the Devimon from the same set. So if you say, let's say play cost 12 or lower, and then you reduce, because then at least you're able to play out at 5 cards in hand, a play cost 7. But I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think they could have changed the wording about that effect so that you can take advantage of how many cards your opponent's going to have in hand. Because let's look at the number 1 problem of why Barbamon is bad. In the Digimon card game, not only do you draw a card every turn, sure, every card game does, but you have an inherent built-in mechanic that will keep your hand size up to parity. You are never going to neg on your hand size unless you play a searcher that whiffs or you drop something that doesn't replace itself, right? As long as you're digivolving, you're drawing cards. And that's what, maybe 90% of Digimon decks, we could say, because almost every deck digivolves. So it's like, why is Barbamon made? Why was Mirage made to take advantage of that? Because it is easy to get up to 12 cards in hand, but in the same vein, Barbamon was made to not take advantage of that. You know what card I really like? Mad Leomon. Not Barba, I almost said Barba. You know what card I really like? Mad Leomon. The Bagramon card. That says, when an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, you trash its source or whatever, and then you get to trash the same amount of cards that they added. Barbamon should have had those effects. Barbamon either, as a matter of fact, if Mirage was a gain 1 for every 4 when a card is added to hand by effect, Barbamon, instead of playing something out, should have been when a card is added to your opponent's hand by effect, trash the same number of cards they added plus 1 to feed into this hand destruction mechanic, right? So it's not just, oh, I got to add a card and I have to discard a card. No. Here's what makes it good. I added a card, I have to trash 2 cards. So not only do I lose a card, but I lose an additional card. And maybe that could have been abused. But I think that's a really cool effect. I think that's how you would have made this good, because let's go take a look at Barba X, right? Barba X is subjectively worse. Subjectively worse is insane because it's an X antibody. I like its effect to a certain extent. I like trashing security, you know, I think that's fine, but it's when Digivolving when attacking is a conditional. Your opponent may trash a card. If it doesn't, then you play something out, play cost 7 or less. You literally look at your opponent, you're like, hey, I want to play this thing out from my trash. You mind trashing a card in your hand? Your opponent looks at their hand of 12 cards. They're like, nah, I'll just trash this card. Sure, I'll trash a security, but it's probably better than letting you play something out. You know what I mean? Like, the illusion of choice, that's what made the Lucamon deck bad. I played that deck for a few weeks, and maybe that's the next deck that I'll do this type of video on. I couldn't get that deck to work for me, man. And this feels even worse than that deck, because at least that deck felt like it might have been able to do something, but Barbamon is just left in this weird spot where everything does what it does, and it does it in such a mediocre way, man. The perfect card to look at, there are two perfect cards to look at. Not just the Mad Leomon. I would have liked that effect, but let's say we don't want to go that route, right? There are two cards in the card game that does what Barbamon should be doing better. Number one is a card that we got all the way back in EX2. That is Golfmon. Simply, when Digivolving, all players trash cards in their hand until they have 5 cards left. That's so good. I would have loved for Barbamon to have that effect. Maybe to make it fair, you do the same exact thing, that both you and your opponent trash until you have 5 cards in hand. But for what it's worth, I think it's also fine to just make your opponent trash down to 5 cards. Or maybe let's say 5 is too much, right? Make your opponent trash down so that they have 7 cards in hand. Nah, I don't. Why do we have a Golfmon with this effect? And Barbamon came out and it's just a blind trash 1 card. The other card to take a look at is Moon Millie. Moon Millie would be, it's such a beautiful level 7 for this deck. But again, it's a level 7, you know, like the fact that it's a level 7 just puts it a touch out of reach. On play and when Digivolving, your opponent trashes cards in their hand till they have 5 left. And then for every 2 cards that it trashed, you pop one of your opponent's tamers. I don't even want that part of the effect. Barbamon should have just been your opponent trashes cards in hand till they have 5 left. Barba X would have then just said, when Digivolving, when attacking, once per turn, trash 1 card in your opponent's hand, or, you know, do this. Like, you get the choice, like either play something out or trash a card. Maybe, and then you would rework some of the other effects in the line so that it's not so easily abusable to you know, absolutely destroy your opponent's hand. And for what it's worth, because I know I'm probably going to see a comment about it, I understand, I get it. I know card destruction as a mechanic is something that can get out of hand really quick in card games. But just looking at Barbamon, it is so easy to see just little places where it could have been improved. Little places where it's like, if they had done this, I would at least consider playing this deck in a regional. I would at least consider this deck to be good, right? I think Ferrismon is such an awesome level 5 because it can be a 2-cost Digi-Evolution or it's going to trash a card. But the fact that when your opponent's at 6 cards in hand, Ferrismon does nothing is like, seriously, man? Seriously? The one attacking is cute. I think you can leave that as it is. Your opponent may trash a card. If they don't, then you play something out. I think that effect is fine. But for Barba X, I expect them to be menacing. I expect them to be oppressive. Look at Levia X. That's pop a 3, 5, 7, and potentially a tamer with Sec +2. Lilith X is protection incarnate. Bielza X is, I'm blowing up your security. I play right into my deck strategy. I'm blowing up your security and I get to play out Imp on deletion. What other Demon Lord X do we have? I think Barbamon, because we're still waiting on, what's it called? Balphamon. We're still waiting on, oh Lord, I can't even remember the other ones. I'm sorry. I'm blanking out and I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's just Barba X doesn't have that oppressive presence. It really doesn't. It's a shame. If they were gonna make it at the bare minimum, right? Barba X should have kept the scapegoat from Barbamon. Like that's a big loss, not even having scapegoat. It should have kept the scapegoat from Barbamon. And in my opinion, that when Digivolving, when attacking, shouldn't have been locked to once per turn. Your opponent may trash a card in hand. If they don't, then do this. That way, you can really establish either a board presence or you give your opponent the option. Because, you know, let's look at it in that light, right? If its effect wasn't on once per turn, if you could say, when Digivolving, trash a card in your hand. If you don't, I play something out. And your opponent's like, all right, well, I'm not gonna trash a card. So you play something out. And then you go and you attack with Barbamon. And you're like, do it again. They're like, damn, you could play something else out. You know what? I'll trash this card. And then if you're doing something like if you're playing a Servex, delete one of your other Digimon to unsuspend. Cool, unsuspend, do it again. Trash another card. You could rip 3 cards out of hand, but your opponent might just say, I'll let you have the bodies instead. And there is counterplay to wide decks. There's Crimson Blaze. There are the floodgates that prevent you from playing Digimon by effects. And there's, of course, Dexmon, right? So it's not like board spam isn't something that you have to be afraid of. That would have at least made this card good. Scapegoat, not once per turn. And then, yeah, if your opponent does decide to trash a card in their hand, I'll trash your security as well. Like, all of that would have at least made Barba X playable and nice. Like, I would have at least tried to theorycraft if that were the case. But I can't. I just can't, not in good faith. And then don't get me started on 7th Jewel Rise, which is your opponent has 5 or more cards in their hand, they trash one. Okay, cute, whatever. I would have preferred literally anything else. Then delete one of their level 7 or lower, but for every 3 cards in their hand, you remove 1 from the level maximum, which means if they have exactly 5 cards in their hand, for every 3, they have, 1 set of 3, you're only gonna pop a level 6. Which means you gotta get them down to 2 cards in hand to pop a level 7. Like, huh? It's just, this archetype is so frustrating. We have I gotta talk about Don Devimon because I'm talking about Barbamon. The Don Devi that we got is pop one of your opponent's level 5 or lower, but if you don't delete, then they trash a card in their hand. We have an old Don Devi that says on deletion, your opponent trashes 2 cards in their hand. Why did we not get more of these? Oh, and sorry, when a card is removed from your security stack, trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. Cool effects. Why aren't we taking advantage of these effects? Why are we playing it so casually with these effects? Why is it that Mirage gets to come out here, be this big bad blue hand control deck, and Barbamon is just kind of left in the dust, really? The worst part about it is because we just got this support, we're not gonna see any new support for a while. Maybe the occasional promo, but the core of the deck, Barbamon and Barbamon X, are just, all right, Barbamon is okay. It's not the best, it could have been better, but it's okay. Barbamon X, however, because that effect is locked to once per turn, and on top of it being locked to once per turn, is a conditional. It's honestly just such a travesty. Honestly, the best rookie for the deck, another gripe that I have is Gaomon for Mirage is a, both players draw one on play, right? Devimon is an on deletion. At the bare minimum, that could have been a start of main phase effect. And oh my goodness, that would have been great. I would have loved that. Now, maybe that's a little bit busted, maybe it would have been abused in purple decks, but I think not. Siako X being the perfect example. I love Siako X. Start of main and when Digivolving, your opponent may trash a Digimon card in their hand. If they don't, you gain a memory. It could have been as simple as that. Your opponent may trash a card, and if they don't, draw a card. Or if they don't, gain a memory. Like, it's so frustrating. It is so frustrating. And I love, the reason I'm even like talking about this, I love the idea of different, unique mechanics. Hand destruction would have been such a cool, unique mechanic I know some of you feel the way you do about hand destruction, just the same way you feel about deck destruction / mill, whatever you refer to it as. But we should at the bare minimum, there should be an effort to try to make these archetypes at least minimally viable. And this just isn't minimally viable. I'm sorry, it's not. It's really not. It doesn't inspire confidence in me. It doesn't make me want to go out and build a deck. It doesn't make me want to pick up the cards. Barbamon X, the last time I checked, I think he was like a $2 SR. Maybe it might be lower because I might be thinking about the alt art that's at $2. You know, it's such a shame. And I wish the deck were better. I wish they made these cards not so passive. I think Barbamon's biggest design flaw is choice. Many would say that is the same design flaw for Lucemon. And honestly, I have to agree, because when you give your opponent the chance to play around your deck, in Lucemon's case, hey, either you trash a security or I'll recover one. And they're just like, you can recover. Because why would I trash my own security? Now, if it was instead, for you One Piece players, Big Mom, trash one of your opponent's security, recover one. Just not conditional, just that's what I do. Would have been better, right? I think Chaos Mode probably, but this isn't a Lucemon video. Let me not talk about that. Let me not get off the rails. We'll do that in a different video. For this deck, if your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand, trash one. Or if your opponent has 5 or more cards in hand, trash one. I think as an inherited effect, the choice of your opponent may trash a card in hand. If they don't, then do this. I think that's fine, but I feel like Barbamon, or at the bare minimum, Barba X should have been a non-once per turn conditional or a once per turn non-conditional. If it was going to be once per turn, then you can just say trash one card in your opponent's hand. Or honestly, you could make Barba X stupid, right? You could just say make Barba X when attacking, when digivolving once per turn, your opponent trashes cards in hand until they have 5 or until they have 7 or something, you know, whatever you decide, whatever Bandai decides to be the fair amount. And then if this effect trash a card in your opponent's security, I think even that would have been nice, because then you can really play into what the rest of the cards do without switching up the rest of the cards. But because Digimon has because of the built-in mechanic of digivolving, it is just too hard to get your opponent down from 12 to 5 cards in hand. Because if you're not ripping out at least 5 cards in your turn, they're going to go from 12 to 7, and the next turn they might just they're going to end up at 8 because they're going to draw a card, and they could potentially end up back at like 9 or 10, depending on if they're going to draw for outside of Digi-Evolution, if they're going to search, draw when attacking, you know, like, to cap up the conversation, this is why I have a problem with Mirage, because Mirage has been around since BT11. Like I said, we're not complaining about Mirage. I'm just saying Mirage has been around since BT11, and Barbamon just came out. Barbamon should be doing the things that Mirage is doing, or at least a fraction of it. And it's just like, nope, it's not there. We're not there. So that's it for today's episode. I'm sorry if it did seem like I was complaining about Mirage. I definitely was. I'm not going to hold you. But that's because I'm trying to see my boy rise up. You know what I mean? Anyways, thank you guys for watching this. If you liked it, let me know down in the comments what you thought. Also, let me know, what are your thoughts on Barbamon? How was it shafted? What would you do to make it different? What hopes do you have for the future for this deck? Are you trying to theory craft anything right now? Because I know I'm not, but if you guys are, I'm interested in it. And subscribe so that you know when future content comes out. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and until we talk to you guys the next time, peace out.